Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Q of the Foldout Cat, coming to you live from Owl House, my house in the Huntsville area of Alabama. And I am doing a series of demos this morning for the Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival. The festival is going on live in Berryville, Virginia, and if you happen to be anywhere close to it and are feeling good about being outdoors at outdoor events, I highly recommend checking it out. There are tons of good vendors there. Wonderful vendors. In fact, Fiber J and I are very sorry not to be there this year, but we decided for various health-related reasons, given the spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19, particularly in states like Alabama, where we live, and Tennessee, through which we've had to drive to get there, that we decided very reluctantly not to go. So without further ado, I'm going to do a little bit of carding this morning. When I card for fun. I try to do as many things as I can for fun, as well as for enough profit to keep me in food, drink, clothes, and cats. I'm not clothing the cats, just to be very clear about that. But I don't card. What I mean by that is I don't card raw fleece or washed fleece. I encourage it. The tools that I use can all be used for that, especially the drum carders that I use, which you may or may not see this morning. But most of the carding that I do, I am carding bats for people to spin, or to felt, or to tear into strips and use in their weaving, or to otherwise just enjoy. Put them on the wall, or on the shelf, on the wall, and look at them. I try to card pretty bad, so that could be fun. So what I'm going to do this morning is a little bit of carding for fun. I'm going to use the tools that are laid out here. What I have is, I'm not actually going to use these because of the length of this demo, but I do want to show them to you. The cheapest way to start carding, if you're carding for fun, and you can also use these tools to card raw locks. Let me adjust the camera a little bit because I'm a little closer to my... There we go. You can also use these, especially if they're sturdy enough. This one is probably not. This one probably is. To card locks, non-processed locks, is to buy a dog comb. These are both inexpensive dog combs. These are the ones that we use in the classes that we teach on carding when we teach live, and we're developing online classes. We'll use them there as well. I think these on sale were about $4. And you can make little tiny batlets, and you can also, slightly larger batlets on these, and you can also use these brushes to I don't like to say pack down fiber, because if you really pack fiber into a blending board or a hand card that you're using as a blending board, it's going to be harder to remove, but you can use it to sort of encourage the fiber to be a little farther down in the tines, if you will. So we do use these for that purpose, and I keep them around for that purpose. I'm not actually going to use them that way this morning. So I'm going to shift these over. The next thing I'm going to show you is a couple of pairs of hand cards. So we use, for carding, we use mostly Howard brush tools, not because there aren't other wonderful tools out there. There are tons of really good tools. Ashford, just for example, makes carding tools that are really good, and we have a couple of sets of Ashford hand cards that we like. But we stumbled on the Howard brush carders and hand cards and blending boards, and we really like them. We like the way they work. We also like their price points as hand cards and blending boards go. The Howard brush products are very affordable. Everybody's budget's a little different, so it's going to depend on the individual person's budget whether something is within that budget or not. But these, I would say, are within more budgets than some. Particularly if you buy them on Etsy, they have an outlet, kind of an outlet/seconds business on Etsy. Howard Brush is actually in the business of doing carding on a commercial level, and so this is kind of an outgrowth of that. So these are, for some reason they call these their student cards. Maybe they think students are smaller than other people, because this is the non-student carder, which you can see is almost for card, but you can see it's almost as big as two of these. I don't know, I've been big all my life, and I've been a student for most of it, so I'm not sure where that perception comes from. But if you're talking about using hand cards as blending boards, I'm just going to grab a little bit of wool here. Basically, if you've used a blending board, if you haven't, or even if you have, I'm going to in a minute, but if you've used a blending board, you'll be familiar with this. But let's say you're not, and you want to blend a little tiny bat or a little rowlog, and I'll show you what a rowlog is. So you're going to take your fiber, and you're going to, this is not sharp, these are tines like the pet combs. They're very much the same things. I don't know that you can see those. I'll turn it sideways, it may be a little easier to see. Lift that up. There we go. I'm sorry I'm looking sideways. I'm trying to see what you guys see. All right. So you can see those tines. So you take your fiber and you anchor it with your hands at the top of the thing you're using as a card, or the hand card in this case, and you keep it anchored and you pull down. And that process deposits fiber in the tines. And because in this case we're using a dog comb, or sorry, a hand card, there's not that much area. So I'm going to lay down this little bit of natural fiber, and then I'm going to put a little bit of other stuff on it. I'm going to try a little of alpaca. Okay, I'm going to put a little alpaca in there. I'm doing that the same way. I'm laying it into the tines, I'm anchoring it with my fingers, and I'm pulling away from the anchor point. I'm going to put in a little bit of red, because I happen to have it. And at this point, I'm actually going to grab one of my pet combs. And use it to ease that down a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to lay a little more natural fiber down over the top. Kind of sandwich in the alpaca. And now I've got fiber in my tines, and the easiest way for me to get it off is to lift up the little loose ends here and just pull it off. And now I have this kind of blended red-orange natural thing that I can spin, or I can pull apart in felt, or I can recard. And so I think I'm going to recard it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be blending those colors together. Now you can see that the orange and red are integrated with this more natural color. I'm going to do that with the rest of this. I don't want to get my tines too full, but you can see that not all of this is actually down in the tines. You can see the tines here. You can't see the tines here because there's some fiber lying on the top of it. That's all right, it's still been carded. So now another thing that you can do if you want to create a little tiny roll log. A roll log is a fiber prep of rolled fibers. Some people call the little ones, like the one I'm about to make, poonies. I have heard that word, I've used that word. I've also been told that that word is reserved for making roll logs out of cotton. So since I'm no expert, I am going to just call it a little roll log, or a mini roll log. If you know better and want to educate me in comments, you're more than welcome to do that. By the way, if you are watching this live, if you are watching it on Zoom through Eventney, my virtual storefront at the Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival 2021, you're welcome to put comments in the chat in Zoom. I won't be able to answer them until the demo itself is over, but I'll leave the Zoom room up long enough to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'll answer questions at that point, so no worries. If you are watching this live on Facebook, you're welcome to put questions in comments, or comments in comments, and I will get back to those afterwards as well. So the other way that you can, another way, I'm not the fiber police. People who know me know I like to say and firmly believe there's no one true way to do things. So I am just showing you a couple of ways you can do this. And another way, you remember last time I just lifted this off as a little sheet. This time I'm using my thumbs right here to kind of brush the fibers up. And now I'm going to use my fingers to roll the fiber off. And now instead of a sheet of fiber, I have a little roll of fiber. Let's see, let me give you a slightly darker background there. There we go. Okay, you can see that a little better. So this is really more of a faux lag, because it is, a roll lag is typically drafted off the surface that it's been created on, and I just rolled this off, and I will show you what that means in a minute with the blending board that's under here. But it is a prep very much like a roll log, and it will spin very much like a roll log. And I love to spin from roll logs. Spinning from roll logs is a lot of fun. This is a very lofty fiber prep, and it will get you I think I've got my yarns right here. It's going to get you a pretty woolen yarn. Fiber J, have I got that right?
I believe so.
I think that's right. I know the difference between the types of yarn. I sometimes have trouble remembering dualities. I broke the lock on a car once on the driver's side door of a car because I could never remember which direction I was supposed to turn my key. This was back when you opened your car doors with keys. I don't know if any of you remember those years. Yes, I have been alive since the Stone Age. I also remember rotary telephones and when MTV actually had videos. So there you go. Now I am thoroughly dating myself.
My family still has a rotary telephone in use.
Okay, so he's dating himself and he's younger than I am. So
I'm dating my fact that we live in the boondocks.
That's fair. So this is the larger one. I don't know if these are student Rologs. This is the or student cards. This is the teacher card. I don't know. It's the Q size card. So this one, let's see. I know I've got a basket of. There we go. I want to use some brighter colors. So this is going to work very much the same way. I'm going to take this fiber. I'm going to put it on the tines, and I'm going to drag it down.
You want to tell people that you have it such that the tines are pointed away from you?
Yes. Well, no, I don't, actually. Yes, you're right. No, that's right. Yes, he makes a good point. So the carder, to use a hand card as a blending board, in order to draft the fiber down the way I'm doing, you want the tines of the carding surface to be pointing away from you. So that's going to be hard for me to demonstrate here. Let me see. Okay, so you may be able to see there that there's a little curve in the tines. They go in and then they go out. Okay, so you want that out part, you want that angle facing away from you. Thank you for that reminder. I'm going to get rid of that. And now I'm switching pinks. I'm going to put a different pink in here. Yeah. And we seem to have some shocking pink of some other kind. So we'll lay down a little bit of that. Okay. And then we must have some fun. You gave me Firestar, it's probably not the right colors. All right, so here's a little sparkle. This is Angelina. Angelina started life as an industrial fiber, and it's still used as a number of industrial uses, but it is now made into a whole bunch of colors that are not made for industrial uses. They are actually made to do pretty fibery things with, and we are big Angelina fans at the Foldout Cat. I have 80-something colors of them, I think. All right, and I picked up a different tool now. This is a brush, also from Howard Brush, that is intended to do what I'm doing with it. This is a brush that is going to take my fibers and pack them down a little bit. I know I was trying to avoid that term, but my caffeine-deprived brain cannot come up with a substitute.
Blending.
Blending. It's blending them. All right, well, that's one way to put it. What you're really doing, the real blending is happening on the blending board, but fair enough, we'll use that. All right, so I'm going to go back to my pale pink here. And I'm going to cover up my Angelina. Not because I'm ashamed of it. The Angelina is definitely out of the closet, but because I just want a little bit of a layer of wool over that so that it doesn't escape. Especially if you are planning on making something, carding something like this that you are going to wet felt. You do not, or needle felt. You don't want the Angelina to be totally on the surface because Angelina will not felt. It is not an animal fiber. It does not come from the wild native Angelina of Kalamazoo. So you won't be able to felt it. You need to felt around it. So you want some fibers, some animal fibers that do felt around your Angelina so that they'll anchor it in. So this I could also pull off the way I did the first one as a little badlet. But I could also, this surface is big enough that I can actually draft a roloc of it. By the way, if you hear the jiggling in the background, that is 2 of the 3, okay, well actually there are 8 right now, cats at our house. But 5 of them are ferals that I rescued when the mama had her litter under my house. And I do actually mean under the house. The other 3 are the resident fold-out cats, and 2 of them are engaged in chasing one another around the house. So the jiggle, jiggle, jiggle is because they all have bells. All right, so I'm going to draft this off, and I'm going to actually draft it off into a proper roloc. Because as I said, technically, again, not the fiber police, technically a rolog is a fiber prep that has been drafted off of a carding surface, so that the fibers have been pulled out a little bit more, even more than it was in the faux log that we made on the student card. So I'm going to take my dowels. I'm pulling up again, I'm using my thumbs to pull the edges of the fiber up and away from the very front couple of rows of tines. Then I'm going to take my dowels. You need some two long, same-sized straight things to do this with. You can use knitting needles. I actually have a pair of big plastic knitting needles, like, I don't know, size 15 knitting needles that live in my carding box. I got out the dowels because if you buy a blending board, this is typically what you'll get. And I'm offsetting them, and the reason for that will become apparent. And I am holding them together. I have captured the leading edge of the fiber with them. And now I am going to roll, and then I'm going to pull. I'm using my thumbs, I'm actually using my forefingers to anchor my hands, and I'm pulling against that anchor. And the fiber is gradually drafting off the handcart. And if you guys can see it sort of stretching there. Now I have found, and of course there are exceptions to every experience, and I may be the exception, I have found that the part of creating rologs that takes me the most practice is the drafting of them off the blending surface. The blending surface part is pretty much a matter of painting with fiber. But this process, I have found, takes some practice. If you are a rolog drafting savant, I kneel at your feet and would like to know what your secret is. If you are not, know that you are not alone. Alright, so that's the last of my fiber there. So I'm just going to I'm going to draft that last little bit out to encourage it to lie flat on the rolog. Now, this is why it's important to have your sticks offset. If they are not offset and you try to extricate them from the inside of the rolog, because it's going to be very tough to spin or felt this while it's stuck on these two pieces of wood. Hashtag statements of the obvious, but still. It's actually very hard to pull the rologs apart if they're not offset like this. You need a handle. You need someplace for your fingers to go. Fortunately, I offset them. So, and I'm pulling on both ends, and I'm also twisting on one end, and gradually I'm extricating one of my dowels. You can see that this one is moving. Hey presto, it's out from the middle. Now, it will be much simpler to get this rolog off its dowel, she says effortfully. Well, that one was perhaps a little tight. Yes, definitely a little tight. But there it is. So you can see that this one is much tighter than this one is. This one has been rolled and it's been drafted out. It's also been compacted a little bit. Also, there's more fiber in here. But this also is a lot of fun to spin. Usually when I spin a rolog, I usually spin it from one end. And you get this sort of fabulous fluffiness, and you also, especially if you've used multiple colors, you get a real mixture of fibers. You can design rologs, just as you can design all kinds of other fiber preps like bats and so on and so forth, to do particular things if you want to. But if you just throw a bunch of color on it, you're going to get I'm not necessarily going to get all of this pink, for example, at the same time. It's going to come out, especially if I spin from this end. It's going to come out gradually. So I'm going to pull this apart so you can see it. And you can see that this is not actually, it's not coming apart yet. So you don't actually have to do this to spin it. You can typically spin rologs without doing a whole lot of pre-drafting. Alright, so now I'm going to get my hand cards off the table, and I'm going to do a little carding on a blending board. And this will look familiar now because the surface of the blending board, oh, I have my knitting needles out, so I can actually show them to you. They're size 9, they're not size 15. But similar diameter, and they're going to be very useful. With the knitting needles, mind you, you do want to have them, you don't want to have both ends at the same, end of where you're holding it, because if you do that, you can actually see there's a gap. Let's see, I think you can see. There's a gap between them that's not going to be helpful to you. The sticks are closer together here than they are here, and the fiber is going to slip through this end because the end of the knitting needle is creating more space there. So here is my blending board. Now this says Daisy Fiber Company. Daisy Fiber Company is actually hard brush. And this is what their blending boards are branded as. And again, if I turn this sideways, you should be able to see that the same bend is here. The tine comes out of the blending board carding cloth surface, and then it bends this direction. And you want that bend to be facing away from you. Blending boards are typically sold with things called keels that lift them up, and that can make them a little bit easier to work with when you're not trying to have the whole surface be visible to people who are watching you do it on video. I'm not using the keel. I don't actually love the keel, but also I want this to be flat so that the surface is really visible. So now I'm going to get it. I tend to like to have, I like to put together groups of fiber to do stuff with. And this is a meow mix. This is something that I sell. This is a mixture of all kinds of beautiful bits and pieces of fiber. And we sell these to folks who might want to spin with them or card them or whatever else. And I am in the process of turning this one into Rolox. So I have all of these lovely bits and pieces. And then Fiberj has brought me some other lovely bits and pieces. Which are over here, including some UV reactive Firestar, which definitely needs to go in here. Now, you gave me a black light. What happened to it? What happened to the black light? There it is. All right, so I think I can get you a little bit of visual on this.
Over here if you need me to. Yeah.
There we go. All right, see the difference in color there? That's because that is UV reactive. So that it's not coming across really well. It looks like kind of a little mini sun. That is because I've got a black light on it. When I move the black light, it just looks orange. When I put the black light on it, it glows and glows and glows. Some of the people in the Foldout Cat immense corporate structure, who shall remain nameless, really like playing with UV reactive stuff. He has also brought me some Angelina in a couple of colors. And he's also brought me a bunch of bits and scraps, which is what I was pulling from earlier, including this one, which has all kinds of great braids in it. So I did not dye this. This is a piece of another independent dyer's work. So I'm going to move all this. These are Rologs that I made in a previous demo from this same general set of colors, except for that one, which is an outlier. And I'm going to shift them off my workspace. I'm going to shift all this off my workspace, so that I actually have a workspace. All right. So, same principle as working with the hand cards. I'm going to start, anchor your fiber, and pull down. Because there's more area to cover on the full-size blending board, your anchoring hand is going to follow your pulling hand and anchor the fiber on an ongoing basis down the board. Especially if you're starting from the very top. Alright, since I have it, I'm going to actually incorporate into this one some of this pink. Actually, no, we'll use this pink. So I'm going to put a stripe of this pink in here on you. Sometimes I find with the scraps that I've got to draft them out a little bit to get them started. So I'm going to put a whole stripe down the center. Rattling is the table that I'm on. And this is just how I'm doing this. There is no one true way to do this stuff. This is how I'm doing it today for and with y'all. Filling in my gap there. And now I'm going to go back to my natural fiber. This is natural ecru merino. It's a 21.5 micron. You can blend any fiber that you can persuade to do this. You can blend on a blending board or on hand cards or on pet comb standing in for hand cards. Okay. Oh, right. So, for example, this is a lock. Okay. I'm going to anchor the lock, and I've got to persuade it to stay there. And then I'm going to do the same thing I was doing. I'm going to pull down. I'm going to separate this a little bit. And I'm going to gradually extend it down over the blending board tines. And then it will go, where's my brush? Say we're done with this layer, I'll take this and gently draw it. Unless you want to fill up your blending board with pretty fiber and then just hang it on the wall as a piece of art, in which case you are more than welcome to do that. That was not my goal, and so I have taught myself not to pack in the fiber quite that hard.
You want the tines full but not stuffed.
Full but not stuffed is a good way to put that. Okay. So I've got all these colors over here. What do I have? I have this little feather, so we'll put that in. I can tell by feeling it that that's wool or mostly wool. And I have some sari silk thread. Now remember, if you use sari silk thread is beautiful to spin or needle felt or wet felt with, but it is not elastic, okay? Animal fibers and many plant fibers have some elasticity to them, most of them do. Sari silk thread is not elastic, so you need to take that into account when you're putting it on your blending surface, and you also are going to need to take that into account when you're working with it afterwards. So I cannot draft this down, I am just laying it in. And in fact, I am not going to do that with this one because I don't have a pair of scissors in easy reach, and I'm going to want to make a couple of rologs from this blending board. And if I use this thread without cutting it, I won't actually be able to do that properly, and I'll show you why when I actually get to the point where I'm drafting it off. So I'm just going to do that. A little bit of sari silk thread, but you could cut your sari silk thread in smaller bits, and it would work out fine. I'm going to put a little bit of bamboo in here. And I've got a little bit of other bamboo. Oops, get out of there, sari silk. Your moment has happened. I've got some sari silk in a different format. Now this is sari silk roving, this is sari silk thread. This is sari silk thread, this is sari silk roving. And the sari silk roving is going to draft just fine. So this I can treat a little more like wool. I'm still just putting it on in places. I am not going to draw it all the way down the length of the thing. I have this lock, which is kind of akin to the other lock that I was showing y'all. So I'm going to draft that down, put that in there. And I'm going to reach for my brush, and I'm going to stroke that layer of entertaining stuff into my blending board. I'm going to put a layer of wool over the top. I think that I will use some of this natural wool. And the only reason I'm doing that is so that I can kind of anchor in these random little bits of things that I've put in here. Well, okay, that's not the only reason I'm doing it. I'm also doing it in part because I think it will be pretty. If I didn't think it would be pretty, I wouldn't be doing it. So, I've got all these other fun things to play with, but right now, that's as full as I want this blending board to be. So I'm going to go one more pass through with my brush to just stroke my fibers in here. And then I'm going to take it off. Now, this works on a blending board the same way that it did on the hand cards when we did it. I'm using my thumbs, pulling up the loose, well, all of my fingers, but I'm especially using my thumbs, and I'm pulling up the loose end. And now I'm going to offset my dowels. I've pulled up enough of this that I can capture it, and I'm going to turn it, and then I'm going to brace my fingers and draft. It can be a little difficult to figure out where to brace your fingers when you first start. There we go. Now, I want to draft a couple of rologs off this board. You don't have to do that. You can draft as many or as few as you wish. I want to draft a couple. You can see, you can start to see some of those add-ins appearing in here. Here, come on. There we go. Alright, so I have decided that that is enough on this particular rolog. So I'm going to draft it off, and I'm actually going to, when you draft these, you're pulling down, but you're also pulling up a little bit. And this time, I'm going to pull up enough to pull it off. Taking a hold of my dowels, and I'm pulling them in opposite directions, twisting as I go. And then I'm moving the row log off. So there's one. Now I'm using my thumbs to pull this up. Oops. Alright, little row log, your time in the sun has come. You need to make room for your brethren. I'm going to offset these. I'm going to capture the fiber. I'm going to turn it, and I pull. And I'm having a little trouble with this, and that is actually because I put a little too much fiber on here. And that's okay. So what I'm doing, I don't think you can see me doing this, but I actually have the base of the board braced against my body. And I have an anchor that way for the board. And now I've got something more that I can pull against. One of the tricks with drafting row logs is to draft out the fiber, but not quite draft it away from the mass of the fiber that's on the blending board.
And don't pull it out the full staple length.
Right, don't pull out the full staple length all the way across. And I could have made 3 row logs off this board. I could have made 1. One of my favorite things to spin is the row logs that my friend Lisa Wonderly, who runs Creative Rebels by Lisa, makes. And they are jumbo row logs. And they are about 3 times the size of the ones that I'm making here.
And she also does a lot of planned designed row logs. Like
She
you were
does.
speaking about earlier.
That's true. She does a lot of beautiful planned designed row logs in different color schemes. Her row logs are gorgeous. I aspire to one day make row logs that pretty. Alright, we're almost at the end here. Yep. See, now I almost went out the whole staple length there, but I didn't quite do it, so I'm still anchored, and so I'm still good. And you know, if I did, no big deal. Alright, I'm going to declare that done. I'm going to roll it off. And then I'm going to sort of draft the surface of that a little bit and kind of smooth it out on this last layer of row log. Take a hold of my dowels from either end. This one's going to be stubborn, I think. Yep. I may not win this argument. Sometimes, there we go. I just needed a different angle in it. This part is also a part that I sometimes have trouble with. If I have pulled too much and loaded too much fiber on, this is the same problem I have with knitting. I tend to do things very strongly and very tightly, and that is not necessarily your friend when you're making row logs, because you really should not have to expend, you know, more than about a celery stalk's worth of calories to get your dowels apart. But there it comes. Okay, a little fluffy there at the end, that's alright. Scooch it off the dowel, and there's your second row log. So, and probably I really should, with that quantity of fiber, I should have trusted my instincts and made 3, because this one is a little bit big. But you can see that there is tons of color, oh thank you dear, tons of color going on up in here. I'll hold those up a little higher. With this big streak of pink in the middle, and then all of these little bits and pieces of color appearing everywhere else. And so when you draft these out, those other colors and fibers are going to start to make themselves known. And some of them are subtle, like right there, and some of them are not. Those are a little less subtle. It's green. So that is one way to make row logs on a blending board. And you can do more planning than I did. As I say, I had kind of a whole heap of different beautiful stuff to play with, and I just kind of worked with it from there. If you want to make, obviously you want to make specific colors in your row logs to spin, you pick your colors, you pick your fibers. I could have been deliberate about where I put the colors, and more than just, oh, okay, I think I want a stripe of pink here. I could have said, well, I want an LGBTQ rainbow, or I want alternating stripes of black and blue, or I want a fade from blue to red, or I want a spectrum of all the purples that I have. And I would just have laid down my fiber accordingly. So you can do lots more planning than I've done. You can do no planning. You can just put a whole bunch of beautiful wool and bamboo and silk and all sorts of other things next to you and pick stuff out randomly. That you need to have fiber that you can draft. That's pretty much the rule.
I have some comments.
Oh, fabulous. All right, so we got some comments.
Stephanie Truesdale says that she has to draft hers out to 4 to 5 times size, their original size, before she spins them. So she pre-drafts her
That's
relays.
really good to know. Thank you. I appreciate knowing that. I think I said, I think what I said was you don't usually have to draft Rolex, and clearly that is not true. So let me rephrase that. Once again, I say I'm not the fiber police. My experience does not have to be your experience. When you are spinning Rolex, do what works for you. If what works for you is to draft them out, draft them out. The cool thing about drafting a Rolex way out is that you can actually see, as you can with other fiber preps, a little more what the yarn is going to look like.
Yeah, you almost start sealing the single.
Right. So this does not probably have quite enough twist in it to hold up as a single ply yarn, as a singles. But I'm drafting this out to, this is like super bulky weight, and so you can spin it from there, and you can start to see roughly what your yarn is going to look like. So Stephanie, I'm so glad you said that, because that made me think about doing what I'm doing now, and this is really cool. And this is going to spin a little bit differently because you've blocked out the colors a little bit more. Sometimes when I draft Rolex, if I'm drafting from an undrafted Rolex, you're practically going a couple fibers at a time, and I will sometimes find that I'll draft from a Rolex and it'll start pulling out the center rather than what's on the outside, as here. My natural wool is still here, and this is pulling out more of the center of the Rolex. So, great comment. Thank you very much, Stephanie. What else do we got?
Give a shout out to Caroline Moss, who
Caroline, who's here for the second time. Good night,
yes,
woman.
And tell her know that we will get back in touch with her about her other questions.
We can certainly do that. You have other questions? We'll get back in touch. I don't know why I'm saying this to you when you probably just heard Jasper say it, but that's okay. Who else is here? Is this our company this right now?
Barbara Hull was with us earlier. I'm not sure if she's still
Excellent.
watching.
Well, Barbara, if you are still watching, thank you for joining us. This is your second time with us as well. I'm really happy to have you all here. Anybody else?
No, we've had a couple other people pop in and out, but that's the ones that left
Popping in and out is all good. Glad to have y'all here. So that is one way to card Rolex on a blending board, and to basically card little betlets on a blending board. By the way, you can also do what I just did, put all that fiber on a blending board, and then lift all of that off in a bat. I didn't do that for time reasons, but that's also a perfectly viable thing to do, and then you can spin that the way you would spin any bat. One thing to be aware of when you do that is that when I card a bat on a drum carder, pretty much everything goes through twice. Either I card specific pieces of the bat together and then I put all of that back through the carder at once, or I card everything onto the drum carder and then I run that whole bat back through. As a result, the layers of things on a bat like that when I card them on a drum carder, are integrated. Now you can just lay things down on a drum carder and just pull that all off and use that as a bat. But it won't be quite, the individual components will be more distinct, which maybe is a great look, maybe what you're looking for. The same thing applies to a bat done on a blending board. You will pull that mat of fiber off and you can spin from that or felt it, or do whatever you want to with it, but the layers will be a little more distinct than they would be if you were drafting it off as Rolex. So that is not a problem. It is just a thing to be aware of. If there are other questions, feel free to put them. Like I say, I'll check the chat in the Zoom, because as I have this, I'm doing it through Zoom so that folks from on the Eventually website for the Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival 2021, my virtual booth there, can take part. I will check the chat to see if there are questions. I will check the comments to see if there are questions, and if you're not watching this live, obviously ask questions and I will answer them to the best of my ability when I can.